This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. This podcast also does not establish a standard of care, doctor-patient, or client relationship. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. And because each person is so unique, all listeners are encouraged to connect with counseling and medical professionals for assistance with their personal journey. All people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved.
Welcome to We're Not Fine. I'm Dr. Talia Jackson.
And I'm Doug Jensen. We thank you for listening every week to our deep and thought-provoking conversations about relationships.
If you guys don't know what mania is, I'll explain it to you like my doctor explained it to me when they diagnosed me, which is they're like, all right, so you're going to have really low lows and then you're going to have really high periods where you stay up for days on end. You know, you might rack up a lot on your credit card. You're going to want to party and you're going to feel very sexual. And I was like, so what you're telling me is that I'm clinically fun.
I thought last episode was the best day of my life. Well, I was wrong. Because today we get to introduce you to the glorious, gorgeous, brilliant, and hilarious Gracie Canaan. She is a writer, a comedian, and an artist. She's in New York. She's in the alumnus of the NBC's Late Night Writers Workshop, and she also wrote for season 1 of the talk show The Green Room with Nadia Brown on Ovation TV. She's a regular at prestigious clubs like the New York City Comedy Club and my favorite name ever, the Fat Black Pussycat Cat. Oh my God. Delete.
Cot.
The Fat Black Pussycat Comedy Cellar. I dare you to say that 3 times fast.
I'm not going to say that.
I don't think I could say that without a tequila. The Fat Black Pussycat Comedy Cellar. How'd I do?
And I'll tell you. So we have been kind of preparing for this episode, and Gracie and us have been talking now for 40 minutes. And it has been the most delightful conversation. And as we figured out, it's been amazing. Hi, Gracie. Welcome. We're so excited to have you.
I didn't know. I never know when I should like double dutch in. I was like, hi, is this? Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone listening. Doug, Talia, and I are old friends.
We are by now.
We're hard to talk over. And I can already tell that we're 3 extroverts that like want to sing and tap dance for the crowd all at the same time. And so this is going to be a very lively episode.
I have had to work on my interrupting on my own podcast. So, and which I have 2 of today. I have 2 recordings today. So This is actually like a great practice run to be like not just steamrolling everyone like I usually do.
No, that's really hard. Doug and I have conversations about this all the time. And in fact, is what it turned out to be for me is that because of my raging but fabulous ADHD, I would feel this compulsive need to jump in at 500 miles an hour because of, yes, enthusiasm, but also...
I have noticed that, by the way.
Yes, I know you have. But also, I'm so afraid that I'm going to like lose my funny thought. That if I wait until somebody completes their thought, forget it. It's gone.
And wouldn't that be the worst thing in the world? Wouldn't that be the worst thing in the world?
Life ended.
If you forgot. I do the same thing. In fact, I don't know if you recognize the irony of it, but as you were saying that, I jumped in and I said, forget it. I finished your sentence as you were explaining to me how you jump in and finish other people's sentences. So if anyone can understand what the fuck is happening in this episode, I'll give you $10 because I'm already having a blast.
I know.
I'm gonna pull this in a little bit. So, first of all, Gracie became a guest, and I looked at her TikTok on a bit she did as a comedian on bipolar, and it was ridiculously funny. You are incredibly articulate and insightful. And now you tell me that was like an open mic, and it felt very professional to me. And so, we're on talking today about like what it means to live with bipolar, as well as how that affects your relationships and dating and all that. But Gracie, I am so curious about how you came about being a comedian.
Well, the start to comedy and the start to my mental health journey were in a very narrow window. Like it was within the span of a few months in 2015. So it kind of all dovetails nicely into this conversation. So at the time I was living in Philadelphia. Talk about like the best place for your mental health. Absolutely.
That's what I hear.
Yeah. It's just me being punched in the face by Eagles fans all the time. Not really, but like proverbially. And I had always loved comedy. I was like a total theater kid, AV club nerd. And then I went to art school and then I kind of chose design instead. I was like, I'm going to be practical. I'm going to make money, blah, blah, blah. And I just still really wanted to try comedy, but I was too scared to do an open mic. I was too nervous. Wow. So my ex-boyfriend at the time, who, get this, guys, more on this later, happens to be my current roommate.
Get out.
We're
Is that
BFFs.
next episode?
We're BFFs. We have a cat that we share together here. Her name's Engine because he found her in an engine in Philadelphia. But he was so annoyed watching me flail and hem and haw, and watching all of this neurotic, loose, creative energy going into all of these other things like vegan enchiladas and like hot yoga. And he's like
totally misguided, brilliant
right.
energy.
He's like, exactly. He's like, this is hard for me to watch. So I got you for Christmas. I got you a comedy class, like a stand-up comedy class. And then I was kind of hooked. And that was 2015. It's 8 years ago. Shit.
But I have so
and
many
look at
questions that like we don't have time
now,
for.
living in his second bedroom.
Oh my God, look at you.
But your cup
you
matches
made
your
it.
outfit. So you're all good. Yeah, everybody needs to see this cup.
Well, I mean, I'm dying to know in 2 sentences or less, how in the hell did you manage to become exes and then still make this beautiful living situation work? I mean, people
the most
know.
I can say is we had a good relationship. We had an amicable breakup and we had 0 expectations after our breakup for becoming friends. It happened very organically. And our friendship has been a process just like our relationship was. So I think that's the only way you can be friends is like if you were on good terms and there's mutual respect and you don't have any expectations for being friends.
Well, and I was going to say probably a lot of communication, right? Like a really good level of understanding where each other's coming from and navigating that change. You both had to figure out that you had no expectations.
Yeah, and I think there's a few key ingredients because I'm not going to sit here and be some saint who's like, I'm best friends with all of my exes. Like, that's not the case. I'd say I'm friendly with most of them. So that's a good record. But I would say, winning. Yeah, exactly. It's something I can put on my LinkedIn profile. Be like, and 4 out of 5 of my exes would refer me to this job.
You might even want to add that to your bio, right by the big black pussycat.
Yeah, instead, like, who cares about all the other, like, comedy clubs and stuff? Just being like, she's still tight with a few of her exes. I would say, they have to add value still. So if you had an ex, then you were primarily romantic and sexual with, and that was the bulk of your relationship, then they might not add a lot to a platonic friendship. So they have to be able to add value. We were best friends. 2, genuinely, you can't be jealous that they're dating someone else. Right. That's like the sign that's the ultimate green light. If there's even a shred of jealousy, don't do it. Also, same for like if you still want to be with them physically, that's not going to work either. And then if you still have a good, loving relationship that you're willing to put in the communication into and the effort into. So it's kind of those are the 4 green lights. And
beautiful.
Yeah.
God, you are still woke. Let me tell you. I know you said you used to be.
So I'm curious, Gracie, has there been jealousy? And have you two had to navigate that?
Not on like a day-to-day. Like he brings people around. He's met my partners. I've met his partners. The only time where it's been a blip is where we have relationships or situations with people that the other person knows. And that has happened a couple of times, and that's been a conversation. So one time that happened with one of my friends, one time that happened with one of his friends. He was way more mature about it than I was. Please, like, again, I can't highlight enough how not mature I am. Like, just because I'm friends with my ex, I was like, I can't believe you did this. You lied to me, blah, blah, blah. Like, you have issues. I am not talking to you for 2 weeks. And then an hour later, I was like, I just really need to get that out of my system. I get it. Love you. Blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
so it's like,
it's a journey.
but it's always,
is what you're saying.
Yeah. It's always been worth it. But I think that's been the trickiest thing is just navigating that. But it's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to sound corny here, but I do think you get to a certain point in a special relationship where it's like a soulmate relationship where it just kind of transcends that. And I feel that way with a handful of like friends as well.
It's really beautiful. You know, I also think, Gracie, that there's something, and, you know, given that you are younger, I think this younger population is coming up.
How young?
Like what?
You'll never know. I'll
never know, and I'll never tell. So I find myself thinking, though, your generation is kind of changing a lot of those rules and norms about relationships. And I think being able to transcend, to use that word, and I love it. It's just so beautiful because we don't want to control people. We don't want to, but we are human, right? And have feelings. So if we can communicate those, it really helps navigate any relationship of any kind. I'm loving it.
I will say this, Doug, that it's not a hugely I wouldn't say it's across the board in this generation.
That's fair.
I would
That's
say
fair.
it's more and more because I have also been in relationships that are very conventional, that I feel like I'm an outlier in, that, you know, open communication is like pulling teeth or, you know, I'm bringing, like, a lot of it is, I would say even, I think there is a lot more awareness that comes with each generation being like, hey, this really didn't work for our parents. They're very unhappy. How can we troubleshoot it?
That's
but
right.
also, I think it's working on yourself more than anything. And then also the chemistry between you and that person. So I think that's, you know, like sometimes it's like, I would not be cool with, like in my last relationship, I wouldn't be cool with so many things that I'm cool with with like my ex right now. So
But wouldn't you say like this is what growing feels like? Like we have to be pushing ourselves through some really challenging, uncomfortable situations to even know that we need to grow and shift and mature, which might be the perfect transition to just diving right in because like this is why you're here and we just really want to hear your story. We immediately fell in love with you after that clip that hopefully is at the beginning of this episode so that you guys can see how we fell in love and why we just needed to have Gracie on. But we really want to know about your bipolar story and maybe even just beginning with like what were some clues to you growing up that you might have bipolar? And just tell us your story if you would.
So my upbringing was really clouded by a lot of like emotional turbulence, I guess, just like, you know, divorce, a lot of like emotional instability within the family. So I can't really point to something and because there were so many factors. So I can't really point to something and say like, oh, I was really depressed or I was really high here when I was a teenager or when I was in college, because there were, you know, so many factors of family drama. There was alcohol. There was, you know, when I got to college and in my 20s, this is a massive factor, birth control. That was like a huge, huge factor. So it was kind of hard to pinpoint like when I noticed that something was wrong. But I think I kind of accepted, like, I was always in a lot of pain and I always felt like there was something wrong with me and I felt like I just couldn't regulate my emotions. So that especially came to light like in college where I was kind of on my own for the first time. I wasn't given a lot of emotional tools and I would go through these periods of being like really, really down on myself, like really suicidal ideation, really just like horrible self-esteem. And then I would go through these other periods too, often like in the same breath, like I feel like in the same, where I would just be so excited about everything, mostly like projects or whatever. And I would like make a ton of like, I was just always nonstop going, or I was really, really low. And then it wasn't until 2018, actually, where I went in and I was like, okay, I think I need to explore being on meds. There'd always been like a massive stigma against medication in my family growing up, right? Which we all probably relate to.
Yep.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe even like second generation immigrant families that like struggled. I mean, yeah, I can really relate to that.
Are you from an immigrant family?
Yes, my mom. And so yeah, my mom is Israeli, but she was born in Russia during the Holocaust. They like fled and then grew up in Poland until end of the war. Then they moved to Israel. But yeah, there's like no room when your parents have had that kind of a story to be sad or whiny and not just deal with whatever it is, right?
Yeah. My friend, shout out to a very funny comic named Eitan Levine. We were talking a couple days ago.
Oh, he sounds like my people.
Oh yeah, he's your people, and his grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and he was saying that his mom would be like, your grandma didn't survive the Holocaust for you to get a B on this math test.
That's right. That's right, Gracie.
Oh my God.
Oh no, it was like a daily, there was always something every single day. If I was like complaining about something, or especially if I was like hungry or whining about like, oh my God, I'm hungry, she'd be like, you would have never survived the Holocaust. And she would shake her head and walk away. But that was like exactly Eitan Levine.
Right. So like Prozac was like, that was like completely out of the question. Yeah, I think it's something that I still, even at 31, almost
What?
32,
You said you would never
wink.
tell.
What? I meant 21, 22. What? I just bought my first legal beer. What? But even recently, I went off Prozac to see if I could handle being off Prozac. And then I was like, why am I doing that? Why that stigma still lives in you. So I, basically I had a hospitalization in 2015. And we can like talk more about that whenever, but that was like a big signpost and being like, okay, something is not right here. And whether it's the birth control or the therapy or the this or the that, like there was something really in my head. And this was also 5 months after I started comedy. So it's weird that this did kind of go hand in hand, but I was basically like, if I don't figure this out, I'm going to die. Like if I don't, I'm not going to survive. So,
and I feel like that's accurate. I mean, what I have heard is that, all depression is horrible, but there is something about bipolar depression that I have heard is the darkest, coldest, loneliest, most aching depression of them all.
Yeah. It's so hard to even think about like comparing, or saying like what's the most potent or what's not or whatever. I also should mention too that like my official diagnosis was bipolar NOS. So I have never had I have had hypomanic episodes and like rapid cycling and stuff, but I have never, I don't have like bipolar 1, bipolar 2. I'm not like Silver Linings Playbook out here where I'm just like kind of, like my case isn't so extreme that it is like not manageable or it's cost me like a ton of serious things in my life. Luckily, because like I've had the support group and the resources to be able to handle it. But I think so. Basically, what happened in 2015 is I think it's a good starting point. Yeah. I was under a lot of work stress. I was looking at a move. I had just started comedy. I really wanted to move to New York. I was disagreeing with my partner at the time, and any kind of tension in the home like really sends me spinning because of growing up and all that stuff. So I had a passive attempt. And I told my therapist about it the next day, and she was like, LOLs, we got to like send you to a place actually. And I was like, wait, but I just came clean, and like, can't I just like chill in a bathrobe and watch New Girl? And she was like, nah, we gotta send you. And I was like, well, what happens if I don't want to go? And then she was like, well, we have to like basically arrest you, and it'll go on your criminal record. And I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm like, all right, this is the worst thing that you like, someone in that situation, you're so vulnerable. And it's like, if you don't go to this hospital willingly, you will get arrested, which I understand, your liability, et cetera, et cetera.
Gracie, will you tell people, just in case people don't know, what a passive attempt means?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's, well, you guys also, because I know it from my side, so let me know too if you think that this aligns with your definition as professionals, is a passive attempt is like a suicide, there's suicidal, when talking in the context of suicide, so there's suicidal ideation, which is like you're just kind of thinking about it, you're thinking about maybe how you do it. Obviously, an active attempt is when you take decisive action to end your life. And then passive is, I guess, kind of somewhere in the middle where you're like, I'm lining up everything and I really am, I'm taking light action to make sure that this, but I'm not fully, oh gosh, I really wanted to say this, but it's so dark.
Say it.
I was like, I'm not trying to make fun of this, but the idiom that came into my head was, but I'm not ready to fully pull the trigger. Yeah. And that's just like, so, that's all I could think of.
Gracie, I think that's really well put. I think that's very well defined. Yep. Because one is very assertive and aggressive and a very direct plan, and the other is indirect, right?
Yeah, right. There we go. That's all. That's why you guys are the mental health professionals, and I'm the bumbling comedian.
No, we could listen to you literally all day, and you are so emotionally intelligent, and I can tell you've done so much work. And
trying. Yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Oh, so basically, I told them that I was like, I did X, Y, and Z. I really just wanted to fall asleep and not wake up, which I didn't know at the time is textbook past. Like that is now something that they ask you, have you had any thoughts that you wish you'd go to sleep and wouldn't wake up? Like,
that's right.
I didn't know that was a thing. And that was 2015. I was like 23. It wasn't that long ago. Because again, I'm super young. If anyone gets anything from this, it's that I'm incredibly young and I'm aging
That's
backwards.
The only takeaway from today's episode.
I am Benjamin Button. But basically from then on, and I still, when I got out of there after like 5 days, and it was so funny. I wrote a pilot about this too. And I was like, I was such a bitch in there. I was just like, yeah, I like have a 401k. Like, I don't need to be here with like these people. Like, I was so like, no, I don't think you guys understand. Like I was working in anthropology at the time. I was a designer. I had a boyfriend. I was like, I had like a good life. And so I was like, no. Like, I don't belong, finger painting in this room with this woman who's yelling about her pet lobster. And now what I realize is like, it doesn't matter what your status is. It doesn't matter how many or how few pet lobsters you have and how loudly you're yelling about them. Like, we all have issues and we all belong in that room. Like, if you're in that room, and that's
But that
fine.
is such a real and beautiful insight. And I think that whenever we are just fighting against what is, it causes so much pain and we're not able to begin the healing process. If we're like rejecting that part of our identity, it doesn't help us heal and incorporate it and manage it. And so, yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah. And there was also no mental health talk in my family. Like, to this day, honestly, I will talk to my dad about bipolar and he's like, I just can't see it.
Right. Right.
It's hard to see, though. I think oftentimes with bipolar, and you mentioned 1 and 2, there's cyclothymia as well, and then there's the NOS, the not otherwise specified, that you have been identified as being diagnosed with. The thing about it is the depression part of it is so oftentimes what we focus on. Even as clinicians, we kind of focus on that part instead of that hypomanic, which is a lower level of the mania than other people might experience in the bipolar 1 or 2 categories, or 1.
Oh, yeah. And I'm like, and with my dad, I'm like, you can't see it. I'm constantly talking about like this project, that project, like this is, and I'm like, and I think that we can just chalk that up to just a lack of mental health education and widespread awareness, especially in that generation.
That's right.
So, I do think that from 2015, my hospitalization in 2015 to my diagnosis was still 3 years. So I got out of there. I was like, that was nuts. That was cray. What? I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to do this. I guess I have depression. Like that's what they diagnosed me with. They were like, you have major depression. And I was like, doesn't sound like me, but okay. Didn't take meds or anything. And then, I can't remember exactly what brought it on in 2018. Oh no, I actually think I went in for Adderall in 2018. I think I went in because I wanted to work more and wanted to like focus more. And I went in and they gave a questionnaire, and within 5 minutes, this doctor was like, yeah, sounds like you have bipolar. And I was like, wow, I feel like he's wrong. Like,
there's such stigma around that diagnosis, right?
Well, I still didn't really get it. And honestly, like Doug and Talia, to this day, I still will look at my friend and be like, but like, do I? And they're like, do not go off your meds, you dumb bitch. Like, I love you. Like, and I'm like, but like, do we know for sure? And they're like, yes, like you're a nightmare. No, they love me very much. Is what I tell myself.
Of course they do. You sound like a dream patient.
But I went in there and it was like this guy and he just like wrote me a prescription for mood stabilizers. And I was like, okay, like I was like, this is so weird. And then the more I looked into it, realizing I was like, oh, this diagnosis is actually like, it was like the start of a new chapter. Cause I was like, it is such a relief. Somehow like there is now a handbook. There is like a reason, I don't really say it to people. I don't have it listed on my Instagram. I'm not like the bipolar, cover girl or whatever, poster child. But it was really like, okay, there's finally a way for me to understand and process all of this crazy shit I've been dealing with for 8-10 years.
Yeah. Gracie, I'm somewhat curious too. When you first got that diagnosis, I mean, I'm kind of hearing that there was that sort of almost rejection of it. And it is important to figure out, it's a complicated diagnosis. It really is. Because like even as you still process, and especially if you're medicated and your mood is more stable, you're like, I'm good. So a lot of people will go off their medications, right?
Oh, that's right.
I mean, I did that with Prozac. I just did that with Prozac. And I was like, I can never do that with my mood stabilizers.
Right.
Like because that's what happens. And it's this weird thing where it's like, also, and I think this is true with any kind of mental health, issue or diagnosis is like, again, I'm still part of that generation that grew up thinking that depression and anxiety and all these things looked like one thing. Like I thought that schizophrenia and bipolar were the same thing growing up. I thought that if you're able to get out of bed and you're able to do your job, then you're not depressed. If you you really only think it looks one way, and that's the most extreme. So there was also a part of me that's like, I don't want to appropriate people with real issues, quote, like forgetting LOL 3 years ago you were in a hospital. Like that's not a real issue. I'm like, yeah, but that was like a bit. That was like,
I know. And there's also probably some like amnesia, right? About like how bad was it really? Like I'm feeling okay now. It probably wasn't as bad as I think.
Oh, absolutely. And when it came to the hospitalization, not just amnesia, but I'm sure like repression, because it happened a week before I was supposed to move to New York for a job. Like I moved anyway. I like didn't even have time to think about it. So I didn't unpack it until and write like when I wrote my script about it, I didn't do that until 4 years after. So it was really this like I just didn't even have time to process it. But yeah, I think it is too. It's like when you're high, you're like, I don't even remember what feeling bad is. I feel so good. And then when you're low, you're like, I'll never feel good again. You're like, I'll never. And then what I hope and what I think I'm experiencing is over time, you know, with just learning, just adding to your toolbox, with tweaking your meds, with more self-care, with just getting older, that pendulum goes from kind of this. You guys can't see. I don't know why I'm gesturing.
They can't.
I actually can see your finger.
We see,
no,
and
people
it's going to be, well, then
Although
they
it's
should
on
go check it
YouTube
out on
as well.
YouTube.
Yeah.
They should go
perfect.
check it out on
But it
YouTube,
goes,
too.
the pendulum like swings less and less far.
Yep.
Over
good.
time. And I have this, you guys want to see something real corny?
Yes.
I have a it'll pass tattoo. So that's actually from Fleabag. It's
Oh
my
my
favorite.
God.
It's backwards. It's from Fleabag, which is my favorite show. And just it'll pass. Like
I
it'll
love that so much. I mean, you are showing up in this really beautiful way. That's like also, I think the important part of your journey is that you went from maybe fighting it, the stigma, not feeling like it resonated, not wanting to be a part of this club, you know, whatever it was, to just really not only owning it, but incorporating it into your identity and your work, your writing, your humor, your comedy. We want to know, I mean, how does it affect your sense of self, your confidence, your identity, all of it?
Oh man. I think that the key has been to embrace it as part of yourself, but not, at least for me, make it a label. Not use it as a limitation, but use it as an enhancement. You know, like I will often say now, like if someone's like, yeah, you're zany or this or that, I'm like, honey, I'm a Gemini with bipolar. There's 8 of me. Okay.
Oh my
like
God, I love it.
So it's kind of just like, oh, this is like a thing, but I'm also not going to let it, I think, you know, as far as incorporating it into like my work and stuff, I think, I look at it more as how does this diagnosis and how does this condition make my point of view unique, rather than necessarily harping on like, oh, I'm bipolar this, I'm bipolar that, this is what I do. It's more like, what are the things in the world that I'm noticing because I have this like thing, this
I literally
diagnosis.
Full body goosebumps. That is so beautiful. And if anybody takes anything away from this besides the fact that she's aging backwards,
Yes.
it's that.
The most important
that
thing.
it's like not using whatever it is, whatever label, whatever diagnosis, whatever condition as a limitation, but instead as an enhancement to look at the world with your own beautiful, unique perspective. I mean, it's mind-blowing. I love it so much.
Yeah, and I do think it's like, this is again very corny, but because I never put corny things out there on my social media because people just want to be like murmur fart jokes, and I want the Netflix special, and I don't want to creep people out. So I'm actually like a hugely emotional softie. So now I might be showing that side of me, but it is really, you do kind of have to look at it as a superpower a little bit. Like I will say one of the things that came with me with my diagnosis and my mental health journey was being a lot more empathetic. Like I was a little bit of a judgmental hard ass before. And, I think having this, it's like, I do think that from just firsthand experience with interacting with people who maybe don't have any diagnosis or like neurotypical, is that a word? Can we say that?
It's a word.
Okay.
It's a word.
Okay, great.
It's an
Versus-
increasingly used word. Yep.
It's a
Oh,
thing.
great. And like, good for them. That's amazing. Like, you can function on 4 hours of sleep without wanting to, punch someone in the face and like incriminate yourself. Like, good for you. Very happy. But those people versus people who are like in the comedy community, like I know everyone in the comedy community, it's addiction or depression or bipolar or something, and it just like it does make you a lot more understanding, which unfortunately is human nature, that you kind of can't fully, you feel it when you're going through that, and then you feel it for other people. And I have been in relationships with people who didn't have that, and I found their worldview to be a little bit just colder.
Yeah.
And I like I said, I'm not some bleeding heart over here like, oh, I can't, like get your shit done. I still sometimes am like bootstrap theory in my head, which is not, especially when it comes to comedy. It's like, you want something bad enough, go out and get it. Like, I'm not this super softy, but I do think it's like you're kind of missing out if you don't have that like ability to understand other people's pain.
And I realize you are only 21, but I also think that you're welcome. I think, Gracie, that also comes with life experience, like that ability to kind of acknowledge what it is that's going on for you and recognize that there is no shame about mental health. Like, it's a reality that everybody has their own experience with it, whatever it is. And there's nobody who hasn't had a challenge. I want to jump a little bit. So you said the piece about like you've dated people who don't have that maybe compassion or understanding and that ability to understand it. I am curious about your dating life and what you've experienced as you're living with your ex right now, who's also a BFF. But Gracie, oh, he sounds like the best. We want him on next time.
Also, can I plug his podcast actually?
Of course you can.
Of course.
Okay, because
it's
so he just reads. It's called Sleepy. He reads people to sleep, and it's actually really helped a lot of people with like mental health and their like sleep
insomnia
ability. Their insomnia. So I just wanted to, maybe like a little supplemental resource.
If he's anywhere by you in this room, absolutely show his face.
He's like painting something.
He does not want to come on.
He's painting a birthday present for his sort of girlfriend in the
other.
other.
Of girlfriend. I have so many questions just about that one line, but we'll go there. But the question is, like, when you are dating, like, when do you disclose any of this? How do you talk about it? What do you need from a partner as you explore relationships?
Well, I've really only had 2 relationships because, again, my diagnosis was in 2018. So I've had 2 relationships since then. I will say the first relationship wherein I didn't know I was diagnosed is so funny because we dated for 7 years. He was with me through all of that, like me just freaking out, crying. Like, imagine just like an undiagnosed bipolar person on birth control, like running around, and then me calling him a year after we broke up and being like, hey, so I'm bipolar and I'm on meds. And he's like, no fucking shit. Like,
what? He never said anything?
So funny because he got sober too. Well, and we're like, oh, aren't we just being our best selves? Like,
maybe you just needed to break up and then discover yourself. But are you saying that he already knew? Like, was the no shit an acknowledgement?
He knew something was up. We both knew something was up. Like, but it was one of those things where when I got the bipolar diagnosis, it was like, oh, facepalm.
Yes.
But I will say, mostly my partners have honestly been very understanding of it. And I will say, like, I've never relied on a partner to fix what I can't fix myself. So it's more like I'm letting you into what's going on here. Like, I need a lot of sleep. I can't party this much, X, Y, and Z. Like, that's something that I dealt with in my last relationship. I was like, I can't party with your friends like this because, like, some people will just get hungover and groggy for a few days, and I will like go into a deep depression. Like, I can't do that. So it's more like, I'm responsible for this. Here's what I need. Here's what may be different about dating me than someone who doesn't have bipolar. And I'll try the best I can to just like keep you up to date. I think that's the biggest thing is just not keeping them in the dark and being like, I'm doing the work. And, you know, yeah, I don't know. And I think it's also made me better at, like, I feel like because I've had to deal with my diagnosis and my, and being bipolar, I've actually been better at like the language of therapy and communicating than my exes.
Yeah.
Which sounds bad. I feel like I just bragged, but it's like,
I mean, what it sounds
because I was
like,
forced to do it.
yes, is that you've done your work. I mean, what Doug and I talk about all the time, right, is that like, this is case in point that if you are not taking care of yourself and if you're not doing your own work, everyone else around you has to do your work. And so, Gracie, like, you are modeling what it looks like to be like, hey, this is my shit. It's not yours. However, you are my partner. I'd like to share with you what this is going to look like and how dating me is going to look a little bit different than maybe dating someone else. But I'm responsible for my own wellness.
Totally. And then,
so
and I also think it's like, if anyone's listening to this and they're like, oh, I'm really worried about telling a partner, or maybe you just got a new diagnosis and you're not sure. Well, look at it this way. Everyone, like, mental health aside, everyone that you date is going to have their own shit, whether it's they got divorced or they lost their job or they have weird sex shit that they're into that they like, seriously, that's a whole other conversation where it's like don't let a diagnosis make you feel sheepish, because that is also being in a relationship in total, is like letting the other person know all the junk and or perks you come with.
That's exactly right. You know, Gracie, I want to comment on your talking the therapy talk a little bit more than maybe the average person. That is one thing. I've oftentimes thought about putting a sign in my waiting room, like, if therapy works, you're going to have less and less friends. You're going to be able to date less and less people because, you know, your insight and your ability to talk about it is not going to be average. And by the way, it's not. Like, again, when we were bantering before the podcast recording, I'm like, smart, capable of talking, knows herself really well. Those are incredible qualities, but you need to find someone who has that sort of equal emotional intelligence. Otherwise, it's a bad fit, right?
It's tough.
It is.
I've heard, especially in New York, it's tough. But
well, I'm not at the point where I'm looking for that right now. I was in completely monogamous relationships from when I was 18 to 30. So I am very happy to take a break. I am also, for the reason you just described, Doug, I am also exploring dating women to see if maybe there is, I don't want to say that some men can't be emotionally intelligent and some women can't be idiots. I'm not saying that, but I am being like I'm talking to a younger woman right now and I'm like, what?
Like,
no
impressed?
man has ever made this much sense. Like, she called me up and she's like, we should just have a check-in because, like, obviously, you know, we're in different cities. It's not gonna like go anywhere, but I really like you and I'd like to keep seeing you. And how do you feel about this? And I was like,
oh my God, mind blown. You're just expanding your dating pool. You're just
Gracie,
opening it up.
We're going to have another episode just on this issue. I am so delighted to
Me
have
too.
that opening of exploration.
Yes.
I'm just really kind of thrilled. Well, and I'm
we'll see. I mean,
she backs up a little bit.
Because here's the thing: is like my tolerance for bullshit is going down, so you have to widen in another aspect. So
That's
now
right.
I'm like age and gender now, you know, widening. And like, whatever, if you have kids, but like all of these things that I was like, no, on paper before, I'm like, I don't really care about, but now I'm like, this is a hard no. And like, I will walk away the first time this happens.
Oh my God.
Like,
That's
I am
incredible.
good. I got my ex, I got a cat, I got friends.
You've got everything you need right there.
Yeah, I think having a full life really puts you in a position of power when you're shopping around for a relationship.
I agree.
You know?
Good work.
But
it sets you up really well. We have to know ourselves. We do. And you know, I think that's hard when we're young. I'm curious about something that's not on the agenda to talk about. I want to go back to your family of origin a little bit. Do you know if anybody else in your family has struggled with bipolar? Maybe
I don't.
undiagnosed? I mean, it's hard to know, right?
I don't know that anyone else has been diagnosed with it. Based on like my mom definitely has shown signs. Well, I don't want to say I love my mom very much, by the way, too. Like I love my whole family.
Yeah, not
That'll be
mutually
documented.
exclusive. Yes, you
What?
adore
No.
her.
So I won't say that. And we've all been through a lot, and we are all very close. And it's actually like a weird, beautiful. That'll be part 3. But I will say like a lot of like anxiety, depression, alcoholism. And then you guys, I'm sure, obviously know it didn't start with you. So I think there's also a bit of transgenerational trauma happening there. So I don't, and I've kind of pieced together bits and then again on my dad's side as well, like PTSD from the war, alcoholism, depression, just. So I don't know about bipolar specifically, but I do know that there's some junk in the trunk.
I think as we
Junk in
do
the
that work, I think that's it. I think we kind of start to explore the stories we've heard. I love how you said that. I think that's an important piece. Like all of a sudden you realize, I bet that might have been going on. Or when you talk about transgenerational trauma, of course, there's so many pieces
real.
of that puzzle.
And that's actually a really beautiful thing, like transgenerational trauma in healing with your family, I think,
right.
because realizing that like, okay, a lot of the hurt I have from my parents is they didn't just randomly wake up one day and decide to start doing that. Like that came from somewhere and then that came from somewhere. And it's like, I think if people can change and if they stop doing those detrimental behaviors, then there's a lot of room for like healing and stuff. But that's me being very touchy-feely.
Oh, Gracie, I mean, you are just remarkable. And I'm just thinking about like this pain and all of this like deep, many levels of life experience and insight and work that you've done. How did you turn that into comedy? I mean, your comedy is so real and so spot on and authentic and coming from a vulnerable place. Like, how do you do it?
I mean, I think it starts as like a coping mechanism, right? It's like all comedians are fucked up and it starts because you're like, well, I have 2 choices and one of them is pretty unsavory and like leads to a lot of bad shit and another is joking about it. And that's why I think also it's like, that's why comedians often get in trouble for making really dark jokes or really it's because like I do think a lot of comedians have reached a certain level of pain that is not understood by a lot of people. So when they make these jokes, people are like, how could you even? And it's like, dude, I've been there and like this is how I'm coping with it. And the people who laugh at this will get it. And the people that don't, that's okay. Like I'm not here to hurt your feelings. I am here to like fuck shit up. And it's I don't know, like it's going to be there always. It's always going to be there, the pain. So you can let it take you over or you can play with it.
Oh my God.
I'm going to jump onto that as well, Gracie. You know, in terms of like the pain that is reality, like you are performing when you're on a stage. One of the things I asked you about at the beginning was like how you feel about this microphone that you're using so easily. I do not do this well. So that's why I have this. Here. I know. I don't forget things are there. I'm like, I need it just attached to me. But it's interesting how natural and normalized you've made a lot of this experience. But on the other side, like when you get off the stage and you're back in your real life, I think the real question here that we want viewers to know as well, like how do you take care of yourself? How do you make sure there's an ongoing process of doing this?
Oh my God. It is exactly that, an ongoing process. I mean, I will say first and foremost, support group. Like I have an amazing support system. They all know my shit. Like just living with, I lived with my best friend before this. I lived with one of my really good friends before this, and just having people who know what's going on, and you for them too. Like my best, my roommate that I live with he's 2 years sober. So it's like, I always just, so having people that know your shit and having that on their radar is so important. And then the other thing is just knowing that this is a quote from AA, which I'm not a part of, but my roommate says, which is everything you put in front of your sobriety, you lose. So, and that you can apply that to mental health too. So it's like, if I am really running on fumes, and I'm not saying I always do this still, like I am a hypocrite. I will still like push myself and then crash and burn and learn my lesson, but I'm getting better at it. Is like, if I'm, strung out or whatever and really tired and really pushing myself, and I'm like, no, but I have this deadline. No, but I have this thing. No, but I have this. And it's like, hey, you can do that, but you're going to crash and burn, and then you're not going to be able to follow up, and you're not going to be able to. So it's like, if you want this thing really badly, you need to actually take care of yourself, because that's going to be the thing that gets you there. And that's still really, really tough to navigate. But it's like anything you put in front of your self-care, you will lose. And that doesn't mean you have to sit around and cancel all your plans and give up on your dreams and sit around with a loofah because #self-care. But it does mean like you have to be like, okay, I have a mental health checklist. And if I get half the things done, even half the things on that day, where it's like, and there's like 15 things. It's like walk, journal, drink water, 1 cup of vegetables, meds, meditate, which like I never do, but
it's on the list just in case the opportunity should arise.
And it's like, if I get like even a few of those done,
right,
that is okay. But really realizing like I have crashed and burned too many times now. Yeah. I know how that story ends, and I don't really need, like I have shit to do. I'm looking at all these Post-its. I have a lot of shit to do in my life, and I have a lot of goals and things to accomplish, and that's not going to happen if I don't take my meds and eat my vegetables.
It's use
incredible.
Your loofah.
And use your loofah.
And use my loofah. Yes. Yes. Loofah is pajamas.
Wrapping up this beautiful episode, and maybe like one line of, if you knew then what you know now, what would you say to like 18-year-old you? That was just had no idea what was going on, was really struggling. What would you say to her?
I have this weird thing, Talia, where this is where I get really, really spiritual and weird, but I actually think that the closest I have gotten to like God or whatever is picturing what future self, like sometimes it feels like you have this little guardian angel or something. And for me, that's always felt when the guardian angel has stepped in, it feels like it's a future version of myself. Oh. It's in a way that I can't really describe, but it's like someone is pulling the leash, and the only thing I can describe it as is like 70-year-old me. That's like, no. And I'm like, it's like a gut feeling, but I know something's leading me there. And so what I would say to my younger self is like, I promise it's going to be okay. And like, I'm sending you all of these, I'm trying to like, interstellar, send you all of these signs through the wormhole and through the space-time continuum. And I know you can't hear me super well, but like, I know you can hear me enough to know to keep going. And like, it's going to be okay. And so like, that's it. It's just, it's gonna be okay. Keep going.
Literally it brings
flailing,
tears.
Girl.
Brings tears to my eyes. It's so beautiful. It's so real. Gracie, tell us, you have, I plug all of the amazing, beautiful things that you're doing. You have a podcast.
I do, that I'm going to right now.
Yes,
I'm so excited.
Tell us. It's called like Hot Dads Club. What is it? Hot Dads?
It is. It's called Hot Dads Pod. It's with my very funny co-host Maria Heinig, and we have on a funny guest, and it's just like a fun shoot the shit advice podcast. So you can find us at Hot Dads Pod on Instagram. You can find me at Save Gracie Canaan on TikTok and Instagram. I'm also newly on Facebook. Wow, is that a trove of treasure? Is that a untapped?
It's a relic.
It's a relic.
Yeah, it's a relic, but man, do people on there subscribe to your newsletters? Okay, like I will say, like I am more liberal. Okay, but conservative people on Facebook, they'll show up to your shows. Okay,
wow. What's that about? I want to know what that's about.
I don't know, but I love it. What else? Oh yeah, just follow me because I'm coming out with some fun stuff. I'm going to be starting a Twitch channel. I'm going to potentially be shooting a special in fall in Chicago, TBD. But yeah, that's it. That's all for me.
Gracie, it has been beyond a pleasure getting to know you, and it feels like we've known each other like for such a long time.
You guys are so lovely. You're such great interviewers. You're so your energies are just so calming. I could have like a 4-course dinner with you guys, and I have been meaning to come out to Minneapolis because I hear it's a very fun comedy scene. So when I do, I will let you know.
And
Gracie,
an amazing dining
don't
scene.
Tease us. We would die for the 4-course. I could make it an 8-course meal.
Yeah. No, honestly, I need to go somewhere. Like I want to do a couple of weeks in different cities, and Minneapolis might have to
get
be
your buns to
there.
Minneapolis. But I will tell you, the only time it's fun to really come here is
summer
now until
No.
November 15th.
You're from Philadelphia.
Okay.
The Flyers are amazing. The Wild are amazing. Well, okay, we'll go LA Kings. We can go
Her
Kings
blood
too.
is thin.
They're also
Her blood
in the playoffs.
is thin.
Yeah,
but when
thank
you
Thank
come,
Talia. I'm very delicate. I'm cold right now.
okay. We'll find a
I'm cold
really
just thinking about it.
We'll find a warm restaurant. Gracie,
Yeah.
we got to have episodes 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, we're
There's so much
obsessed.
else we could talk about. Thank you so much for joining us. We
You guys
cannot
are
wait to see you
amazing.
again.
Thank you so much. Well,
Thank you.
thanks guys. Bye.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye. We are going to wrap up this beautiful episode and just say, I kind of, I believe in reincarnation probably more than you do, but I feel like if I had to come back as somebody, it would be her. She's like living my best life possibly, like a comedian, writer in New York. She's amazing.
She is amazing. I think really good insight. And, our podcast tends to have this balance, Talia, between the seriousness of living with bipolar, which, we don't want to take into a great deal of humor because living with bipolar can be very, very complicated and challenging. So it was nice to have kind of the lighter view of what living with this disorder might be, but it's a challenge. And so I appreciate how incredibly insightful she is, incredibly pleasant she is to talk to. And again, 40 minutes before we even recorded, I could have talked with her forever about a number of things. So really grateful.
It makes me feel so excited about what we're doing and shedding light on other people's experiences dealing with whatever it is they're coming to the table with. And what she was saying about you can either laugh or cry, you can either let it destroy you, or you could see it as your superpower and figure out what your unique take on life is because of what you've been through.
At the end of the day, we kind of just repeat this message, but you have to know yourself, you have to deal with yourself, you have to deal with what it is that causes any challenge for you. And approach mental health from a welcoming point of view instead of something to be afraid of or ashamed of. And that's really the message.
That's beautiful. We hope that you got value from today, and we're going to just continue to bring you all of the juicy, interesting, important content that we can think of. And check us out next Tuesday. See you later.